who are telling me all of your most horrifying, obnoxious, saltiest experiences in the publishing industry. Both of you.
Myself because I think that's probably makes the most sense. You all know who Diane is.
Yes. We also have Lyndsay.
My name is Lyndsay Ely. When I'm not doing design and merch for this convention, I am also a young adult author. My first book, Gunslinger Girl, came out last year. And I'm super excited to be here as a beginning novelist, starting her career with somebody who's been in business for a bajillion years. And in a good way.
It's true.
That's a compliment because if you can make it in this business for a bajillion years, you're something special. But I started reading Young Wizards books about 25-ish years ago, and often when I started doing panels, when I started doing stuff to promote my book, people would ask what were your serious influences, and one of the first ones out of my mouth would always have been Young Wizards.
It's now the joke for me is that at publishing it, I have surprisingly few horror stories. Now at the film end, that's not
I can do the publishing end.
Why don't you just publishing? But I've been really fortunate. I've been very fortunate. My editors, by and large, most of my covers have been terrific. The ones that weren't terrific have been recoverable from. You know.
Well, let me add another bit of info about myself. So when I'm not a young adult author or a design and merch person at a con, I also am a graphic designer for my day job, and for 10 years I worked at Quote and Hardcore as a marketing designer, who were the publishers of Diane's American Books. So I've got a lot of sides of the publishing industry at this point. There are a lot of horror stories. I think that you really brought up that in one of your previous panels about being a writer, and if you have to do it. If you feel compelled to do it, then you're a writer. But if you think if it hurts, you can't do it. Because there's a lot of stuff that happens that you just have no control over. And one of the things I'll say is that I probably said the name Gunslinger Girl, and I bet 50% of people in this room said, "Hey, that's a manga. That's an anime. Why did you take that title?" And I didn't. That wasn't my decision.
Yeah.
That was a publisher decision in most cases, especially if you are not someone of note. Then your publisher, your editor gets to choose your title. So it can be a bit of a horror story.
I will say that's never happened to me. I have occasionally had an editor sort of raise their eyebrows and say, "Are you sure?" I'm going, "Did I stutter?"
So my publisher is Jimmy Patterson, which is James Patterson's children's imprint. So it's basically like James Patterson chose your title, and I'm like, I guess I can't argue with that.
That level of success. It's hard to make too much noise.
Yeah. You sit back and be quiet at that point.
There are moments still. You just want to kick sand in their face anyway, just to prove it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You get a little braver along the way.
Yeah.
One of the horror stories that I have is I loved my cover for my hardcover book, and I hated the cover for my paperback. And I did try to bring that up with my editor, and again, it was sales to James Patterson says, "No, this is what we want to do," and I'm like, okay, I logged my complaint with you, and that's all you can do.
No, there really is. Amazing things can happen at the cover stage. There can be huge misapprehensions that can influence everything. I did a book called Stealing the Elf King's Roses, which was a police procedural with elves, and not even like, cutesy elves or anything. And what I got was, instead of, sort of front cover with a glowing rose garden and the artist's wife. And, not a gun in sight. And, the way you can tell if you look at the eBooks Direct website, the way I perceive this, because I use the CSI font. And I want you to understand that's exactly what's happening here. Somebody is killing elves, and we need to find out who. While there are indeed roses and gardens and elf kings and other things like that in the book, hence the title, that completely misreads the tone. And so large numbers of people who saw this book face out went, "This is a romance." I'm going, well, it is a romance, but not that kind. All right? It's a romance where everyone just sort of narrowly avoids killing each other.
It's funny that you bring up guns on a cover, too, because that was one of the things that we ran into designing my cover, because it's a young adult Western. It's a dystopian Western, so it's not a straight Western, but Guns are really not allowed on a lot of young adult tools, and I'm pretty sure the only reason it got out is because James Patterson can do whatever he wants.
Yeah. True.
But yeah, there's like weird little things like that, you know, when it comes to the cover design that you don't think about and you get, you know, get
No, indeed.
But,
And if the art director or your editor or the salespeople get the wrong end of the stick somehow, then it will sort of self-reinforce itself, and the author going, no, you don't get it, is going to kind of get lost in the shuttle. What needs to be clear is that unless you are tremendously powerful, unless you are James Patterson or Joe Rowling or Stephen King or something like that, you are not going to get cover veto. If your editor feels kindly disposed towards you, you may be asked to suggest what you think would look good on the front. And then you might make your suggestion, you submit like a page or two of material from the book telling them, you know, what this scene is supposed to be about, and they either say, actually that's a brilliant idea, why don't we do that, or yes, thank you for your input, slam, and exercising that. And they're under no contractual obligation unless you fasten it down in the paperwork, you know, when you're arranging.
And I did have, actually, I had a cover, I forget what we called it, what it was called in the contract. It was a cover consultation or something like that. It was not approval, it meant absolutely nothing.
No.
It meant they were gonna say, we'll show you the cover before we show the rest of the world.
Yeah, really, it has, I wouldn't say it has no force in law, but you'd go far to enforce it. And you might build up such ill will at the publisher by trying to do that you would not publish a book with them again. So, you know, the wise author, you make your suggestion, you see what you get back, and if it even vaguely, remotely suggests what you had in mind, you go, yeah, thank you. Yes.
I think that's a lot of publishing, is that you have to pick your battles.
Yes.
And again, with the marketing design for 10 years, there were a lot of times, I don't know if this has ever happened to you.
No.
You can get down the line, and places like Barnes & Noble can kill a cover, even after it's been approved, which is something a lot of people don't
They've been really
know.
kind to me. I mean, generally speaking, as I say, I've really been fortunate in, you know, having editors who had the gift to pick the right scene, art directors who knew which writer to hire, which artist to hire to get the graphics they wanted, book covers that look good, you know, composition that looks good on the book. And, you know, by and large, when you win most of the battles, you know, you just say, fine, I'm just back here, I mean, and you get out of it. You stay out, because if you make too much trouble at some levels, it can come back and bite you in the butt in ways that you will be very, very sorry for.
That was a big fear with a number of, I'm part of a couple debut author groups and other author groups, and a lot of people were like, I hate my cover, I don't know what to do. And some of them fought the battle, and some of them didn't. A lot of times, the point of having an agent in a lot of cases is have an agent fight the battle for you.
Yeah.
So they were lucky in case they'd be like, I hate this, and they would be, their agent would go after the editor, and sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't.
By and large, you get to suck it up.
Yeah, basically.
You know, that's really the way it goes. Really good books, people will hand horrible covers from hand to hand saying, ignore this cover. You know, I had that happen with During Fire, which I don't know if you've seen the train wreck there. I'll show it to you later. Everything that could go wrong, yes, everything that could go wrong. You've got a see-through goddess. You've got a hero with what appears to be a congenital problem with his hands, grabbing for her tip. You've got a horse, you know, a fire elemental who looks like a horse who's had lighter fluid poured on it. And I can. It is burnt on my brain the day that cover proof fell out of the envelope into my hand outside my flat in California. And I looked at this and I said, "This is not going as I expected." Actually, I said many other things as well. And you know, it was just like, what the hell is this? And there was nothing to be done. That's what they could afford. They were not going to spend vast amounts of money on a really nice cover for the first book by, you know, a writer that no one had ever heard of. Where, you know, within the first 10, you know, sort of the first chapter, the two male characters, one of them has his father yell down the stairs at them, "What are you doing?" And the answer comes back, "We're fucking!" This was 1979. How did I get away with this? So it's rather, you know, it's an unusual piece of work, and the work then goes up for the Campbell Award twice. everyone suddenly wants the book. They're handing it from hand to hand. Go, don't look at the cover. Don't look at it. Do not look at the cover. And then, now, all right, this is genuinely a publishing horror story. Okay, this was in the days before just-in-time warehousing, where books could be pulped if they were in the way of something that was selling better. And Dorothy Fire crossed paths with the new Stephen King. And just at the time when there was the most demand for it, when the book could easily have sold out its entire print run, which was large for even those days, the King needed more room, and so they pulped half my first edition in warehouse.
I have an opposite horror story to that.
Please, yes.
They overprinted my first hardcover by a lot.
Oh, gosh.
Probably 2/3 of the first edition hardcovers got pulped, and it was purely speculation on their point. You know, like
Yeah,
their
their
first young adult on this imprint is a bestseller. If anyone's ever read Stalking Jack the Ripper by Carrie Maniscalco, huge runaway bestseller in terms of like the YA world, which is actually like fairly small in terms of the adult world.
Yes,
But yeah, I think they sort of thought, okay, we can do this with all of our books, and that has proved to not be true both mine and continuing on a lot of the other books that they publish. So that's a big horror story publishing, is that sometimes it's all witchcraft. Nobody knows what's happening in terms of like sales numbers.
Goldman's law. Nobody knows why. Nobody knows.
It's amazing.
You attempt to project, and sometimes it works, and you get a rep for being a genius, and sometimes it fails, and you hide under your desk and wait for it to pass over you. Hopefully, eventually pass over you.
Hopefully.
Can you explain why overprinting like that is so bad for people who may not understand?
Yeah, it's so I mean that's a cost investment basically. But so when a bookstore buys a book, they buy it on consignment basically with the company that sold it, and so they can return it. They can return it against future sales.
Yeah.
So if you overprint, your books will sit in a store and nobody's buying them, and that's taking up valuable shelf space. And so eventually they will take those books and send them back to the publisher, and the publisher loses money, and they pulp the books and recycle them into new books. So it's the circle of life, but it's not great when they project 100,000 books are going to sell, and they print 100,000 books and you sell
30 or 10.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you get no money, and the sales staff, next time around, when you have the sequel to that book, they look at it and go, no, look what happened in the last one. No, I don't think we're going to do that again. And then, miraculously, your book just doesn't get bought.
Or does not get a sequel, in my case. I had a sequel option in my contract, and they waited to see how the first book sold, and it didn't sell up to expectations, so there was no sequel.
That's good. You're done.
That's extremely common. That's not me saying, like, this horrible thing happened to me. This happened to a lot of people I know.
No, all the time. Now more than ever.
Yes.
It is figure-driven. If your book does not sell its first print run out, you're screwed. That's all it is. So anybody you know who has this thing about, no, I'm not buying this series until the whole series is out, you have actually killed the series.
Mm-hmm.
You put a knife in its heart.
And when you download
The way to
ebooks,
have series
really
happen
good.
is to buy the books as they come out. And that's it. Otherwise, you're strangling it in the cradle. You are making sure the author will not sell any more books.
Buy
so
hardcovers.
by all means, stay home. Don't buy the series.
Buy hardcovers, you guys. If you like a book, if you like an author, if you like a series, buy the hardcover within the first 6 months that it comes out.
Show a little faith, for God's sake. What you're laying out for each new book these days is what? The cost of 4 or 5 lattes?
YA, it's like 3 lattes. 2 maybe if you like
really.
the fancy stuff from Starbucks.
So show some grit.
I would like to point out though that like for some people that is not economically viable all the
It
time.
is not.
No, it's not.
But like $20 used to feed me for a week.
But to respond to that, go to your library.
Yes.
Request it at your library. So library
Order
sales
the
are actually a
book.
huge part of book sales.
Libraries
Huge part that nobody expects.
I do that.
Yeah.
So.
And
So if
more to the point, if you're in a country that has public lending laws in place, when you borrow the book from the library, we get paid.
Yeah.
Well, the library bought the book, didn't they? So that's the first part of it. But also, you get paid a little bit of money every time someone borrows the book.
Yeah,
So
so
it's
apologize for
fine.
making it sound like you have to buy a book. Like
No.
you can afford it.
Go
There are
to the
so many other
library,
ways. Request
tell
from
them
your
you
library.
want it.
Yeah,
When
that
there's
helps.
demand.
Well, no, it
That's
wasn't that.
amazing.
It's just the whole discussion of it's only 2 or 3 lattes that I took issue with.
Yeah,
No,
no,
I
that was a bad way of phrasing it.
Yeah.
I apologize.
I'm granting you that, and that said, for a lot of people, that's how it is.
Yeah.
So, but the point is, you don't have to go that way. Go to the library, say, I really wish you would order in this book. And then magically, usually they'll buy like 5 or 10 copies of it, which is cool for us. And then lots of people get to read it, which is also cool for us. And the more people read the books more, the more copies they will order. And we get paid. How brilliant is that?
And those books will remain in circulation year after year after year.
Libraries
which is
are
more
our
books.
friends. Do not think that authors do not like libraries. Libraries
Love
are
them.
our friends.
You still get paid for the audiobooks, right?
It depends on how the contract is structured, but yeah, it comes back eventually. And also lending of audiobooks through libraries as well. Yeah. So,
You mentioned one of the other really interesting ones that you mentioned. I can't remember which panel. It's been a long weekend. Was about getting your some of the alternate titles that you have suggested.
yeah, you know, you get into discussions, especially if a book is in multiple markets, and for example, the book that we now know of as, or know over here as To Visit the Queen, the British sales force at not Houghton.
Airport?
No. It'll come to me anyway.
A chef.
Begins with an H. Anyway, like that's a help.
There's a lot of
And anyway, their sales staff and the editor on that side hated that title, and so over there it's on Her Majesty's Wizardly Service, because they wanted to refer to the Bond movie. And who might argue, you know, James Bond? Yeah, okay, fine.
That's a good title.
My only problem with it, too many words, set smaller. Bad thing. You know, at this point the designer kicks in and says, your title should be big.
Nobody listens to the designer, you guys. Nobody. Book designers are notoriously angry people. The ones that survive in the industry are just like saints. They learn to sort of circumvent how the editors and salespeople and everybody thinks like, all right, we're going to try to make this a good design. Most of the time it gets close. Sometimes not so much.
But you come up against that, and you might think to yourself, that is a crap title, and the answer is, sales likes it.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's it, you shut up and sit down. Because often, whether you like that idea or not, sales knows better than you do. Now, sometimes they get it wrong, at which point you get to, you know, so go off in the corner and dance a little jig of despair. But if you're really wise, you will not rub it in their faces, because they feel bad, they feel stupid about being wrong. And it's not kind to sort of remind them of it too often. You know, you might run across them at a cocktail party in London or something. You go, yeah, about Wizardly Service. Yeah. You owe me a drink. And then you go on from there. And then really, that if you're wise, you won't take it any further, because people in publishing, they really have long memories. And
It's
you
an
know,
extremely small industry.
it's a very small industry. People talk all the time, and you keep your reps sweet. You have to if you want to work steady. If you like, you know, that weird concept of eating regularly, then you watch where you step. You do not antagonize the people who you know get your work out in front of your readers. It's unwise. You know, it's a bit of a roller coaster sometimes.
It really is.
No one really knows. It is Goldman's law. Nobody knows nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've talked about covers, we've talked about titles. What else have we talked about?
Major edits, maybe?
Edits are, so I don't know, at least I've found, and people I've talked to, you're usually working one-on-one with your editor.
Yeah.
And so there's fewer cooks in the kitchen there. And like you sometimes still pick your battles, basically, but it's a little less.
If there is an author-editor thing going on, I mean, it's within your power if you want. If you've got a real conflict of personalities thing going, you can request another editor. That's what your agent is for.
Or
Right.
sometimes I've known several people whose editors, and this is a scary publishing thing, whose editors either left the industry or went on maternity leave or were let go in the middle of their publication. Ooh,
I got
sorry.
I got orphaned in the last. Julie took and moved on.
It happens a lot. Publishing has been
Yeah.
a huge turnover rate. I used to joke when I worked at home that like I wouldn't learn anyone's name for the first year because I didn't know if they'd be there after that.
Yeah. No, really. Editors are terribly paid for the work they do. Terribly. And they say, screw this. I'm going to do something that actually enables me to eat regularly. Who could blame them?
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those endemic things. The way nurses are paid badly.
Yeah.
It's just like.
And most publishing is in the U.S. is in New York. So when you're trying to live in New York on a $32,000 salary, it's not fun.
Great. It is not great.
I'm not exaggerating either. That's some entry level salaries that. Yeah.
So no fun. But you learn to deal with all this stuff. It's part of doing this bizarre job, and you find your way through if you can survive all this crap.
So what are some coping mechanisms that you found for some of these things?
For which?
For navigating the publishing world.
It's just I meditate a lot. No, quite
You commiserate
seriously.
with other authors.
You go to the bar and complain.
Okay.
We really,
Yeah.
that it's always in the bar. We're all complaining to each other.
I go on Facebook and complain
Yeah.
with the other authors.
You bet. And that's it. There are bulletin boards and online resources where you can go and other people will support you a bit. And you go and complain to them and they will say to you, essentially they hug you and say they're there. And that's pretty much what you got by and large, because maybe the next gig will be better and maybe it won't. You cannot tell. I'm just fortunate. I've had terrific editors right down the line.
That's nice.
I have not had a single editor that I wanted to fire or wanted to hide under the desk when I heard that they were calling. I've never had one of those.
That's good. I hope that I cross my fingers all these times. I've had one editor. I loved her. She got let go.
Yeah, I mean, this and as you say, leave the industry or just moving to another role. I regret intensely the loss of Michael Stearns, who was fabulous, one of the best editors I've ever had. And then he buggered off and became an agent. Well, what the hell good are you to me now? She wept. Yeah, but it's funny. I got a tweet from him the other morning about the new covers for the Dorian books, and I put the pictures up, and he went, "Those are great relaunch covers." I'm going, I have hope now. The man who was my editor and put up with me says that these are good. That's very encouraging. And it's a strange thing that at the book writing end, there is more of a collegial feel to it, that we're sort of all in this god-awful mess together. Film, it's understood. Those guys over there, they are your enemies. Destroy them how you can. It gets quite funny. There are very, very few situations in which, if you're intensely fortunate, if you find yourself in a production or writing relationship in film with people you actually like, with people who are ethical and actually know what they're talking about. That's another problem. Oh God, the experts who have no idea. It's not even like they're experts, but when someone pitches an entire storyline that is so full of holes in its science that you just could not, forget carrying water in it, it's just going to leak like a sieve. I was involved in as the science advisor on a thing called, I think it was Impact, and it was one of those, oh look, the Earth is going to be hit by the moon stories. All right, and now I have no problem with that as a basic idea. I mean, what we know about the science of it right now is that the moon is gently swinging outward in its orbit around the Earth. It will get in a sort of 500,000 years or so to the point where it stops doing that and begins spiraling back in. And sort of another, 200, 300, 400,000 years after that, it's going to get quite ugly. And the question is, will it get slingshotted away in some way that we don't expect, or will it just shred itself by tidal forces and rain down on Earth in is here. And
I need enough of this. This is. Yeah, I'm a little concerned.
it's not for next week. This
Okay.
But the guys who were actually setting up the story, who wrote it was a 2-hour miniseries by courtesy. It was 2 hours and 2 hours. They really had not an idea in the world, and one of the it was very interesting to be in a situation where you give notes instead of receiving them. And I said, this one excerpt sort of popped up. I said, this one line of dialogue here where you're having a character say to the President of the United States that there won't be, after this impact, there won't be anything on the planet Earth, left alive larger than a bacterium. I said, that's like overly optimistic. You really don't understand what happens when a body the size and mass of the moon hits a body that's constituted like the Earth is. You must imagine a bubble, all right? And the inside of what's in the bubble there is being held in place by a very, very thin, tenuous skin of solid matter, only, like maybe 1,000, 2,000 miles deep. And underneath it is like boiling magma and molten metal under very high pressure. I want you to imagine that you've got a Coke bottle full of that and you're shaking it. And then you take the cap off suddenly. You would not want to be standing too close. I said to them. So this bacteria thing, like, put this out of your mind, right? It's not going to be like that at all. So what you really need to have, you can actually shred the moon up like toilet paper and they'll just like drop little bits of it on Earth. That's okay. Right. And, a situation like this where the screenplay has already actually been approved by the co-production partners, you have a problem. This is as good as it gets, really. You cannot ever stop the train crash from happening. You can be, let's borrow a different idiom, you can be the youngest fairy godmother at the christening. You cannot stop the curse, but you can keep it from happening quite that way. That's all you could do. I was Merriweather. Her temper and mine were very similar by the time we finished. I wanted to punch all these guys. It was all guys. Of course it's all guys. I'm going, no, science really doesn't work like that. And nearly every note I sent them for the course of about a month started with, remember how I said that science doesn't work like that? It still doesn't. There have actually been no changes. Science has not seen your notes. And in fact, doesn't give a shit about things. Physics is not going to change its mind for you. This is how it, and again, granting you that the visual arts require a certain amount of elision in how you describe scientific process to people who just want to see the Earth smashed up by the moon. Who am I to deny these little pleasures? Okay.
You're the person they hired.
In fact, the person they hired. So there's really nothing I can do. My job is to make this make some kind of sense.
Oof.
Yeah, and sometimes you pull it off and sometimes you don't. You know what? Check clear. That's all you can say to yourself at the end of the day. This is a job of work. I attempted to bring something that approached rationality to it. At the end of days, I will stand up in front of God and she will say to me, you tried. Get in there, it's good. I've got your back. And there's nothing else you can do unless you are much closer to the production end of things, unless you can grab the producer by their lugs and just say, no! Just say, no, or I won't be your friend anymore. And sometimes that works. If you're close enough to the producer, sometimes that works. But not always. And the check clears. What can you do? It's a job. And that's, it is annoying to say that about what can be, important creative work in which thousands of people are taking home a paycheck because of this thing getting made, or at least hundreds, you know. It's really, sometimes it's a great pleasure to be involved with these things, even when they go wrong. And sometimes it's intensely frustrating to be involved with them, even when they go right. So, you know, it's, you know, you pay your money and you take your chances.
So, do you have any examples of some like really uniquely frustrating things about each industry that don't exist in the other? I'm sure you do. Can you name them?
I'm trying to, I don't normally think of them in the same box, as it were. For me at least, I tend to think of the publishing problems as much less problematic and more fixable, because the scale of the number of people you're dealing with is smaller, and also
investment tends to be a little smaller as well.
Really, you know, generally speaking, also publishing people don't have the same sort of inbred megalomania that it's unavoidable. You know, somebody suddenly gives you control of, for example, the Ring miniseries that we did was $24 million. Now, to me, $24 million still looks like a lot of money, right? You know, if someone gave me $24 million this week, there's all manner of things I would do with it that do not involve buying yachts. You know, but to these guys, that was, you know, a relatively smallish amount of money for you know 4 hours of television. We squeezed every possible penny out of it. I mean, the thing about the Ring is it looks very beautiful. You've got it. The New York Times said it looks more expensive than it is. And though they damned the rest of it sort of with, you know, vague faint praise, at the same time, it's really hard to damn Kristanna Loken looking like a Valkyrie too hard. She was hot in that movie. Quite lovely, and just such a nice lady. But the difficulty at the film end is a lot of these guys, it's usually guys, think they are God's gift to everybody, including you, and you poor benighted thing if you can't see it. And some of us have actually seen them, top to bottom, back to front, stem to stern, and know exactly what they're made of, and we're not terribly impressed. Yet at the same time, they're the ones who are signing off on the checks. So there are times when you find yourself thinking things that, if you actually said them, would get you removed from the production, and there goes your paycheck, and you're not actually helping this thing be any better. So you try to get covert and find other ways to make it be better. You're sneaky if necessary.
And just for comparison, you're talking about $24 million budgets for things.
Yeah.
A book. You're talking under 100K investment in most cases. Author's going to get maybe 5 to 50, depending on it.
Yeah.
Your editors are getting paid $35,000. But printing is expensive, but it's not as expensive as TV production. So it's just a completely different monetary investment. And publishing actually kind of lives and dies on a handful of books. I honed with hardcore printed American versions of Lord of the Rings, and Lord of the Rings basically paid our paychecks for years and years. So just for comparison's sake, it's just a different creature.
Yeah, no, it's true. The trouble is, the more money gets involved in one of these projects, the crazier people get. That's one of the things that started to go wrong with The Next Generation when it was first mooted, because the moment it became clear that someone was actually going to give Gene Roddenberry control of a new series, suddenly the people who wanted to control Roddenberry and started flocking around him like, you know, wasps to spilled beer. It got a bit crazy.
But something similar on the publishing side too. I could see mostly from your young adult experience, but Hunger Games, Twilight, when those hit, suddenly they were paying big money for a lot of young adult trilogies.
Yes.
Most of them did not make money. And only now, about 10 years since those books came out, that they are starting to slow down and realizing we've flooded the market.
Yeah, time
You
to
just can't
pull
do it,
back, wait for God help us, the new crop of readers to evolve
Stop
into this
giving
space.
people $1 million for 3 books when it's gonna sell 10,000 copies.
Yes, yes, because those million, dollars that you gave them, how many other writers' advances could you have paid with that? Yet, these guys they'll do the 3 books. They will, pardon the phrase, they'll shoot their wad. That's it. And
The numbers are very
it's
often
over.
bad. Yeah.
It's over. And, we sit there looking at all the other books that could have sort of slid in and started a new wave of readership of some new genre.
And for the authors, sometimes they never really make it. You do your first book, you do your second book, and then so it's don't sell, and the 3rd book never happens, and so you're left hanging. And the author is just like sad and depressed, and they've moved on.
Yeah, and you have to. You have no choice. You
Can't
cannot.
fight that.
You cannot overinvest yourself in a series that everyone else has given up on. You just say, yeah, oh well, fine. What's the next? What is next? And you move on. This is really not an industry for the faint-hearted. You've got to be persistent beyond your own emotional levels. You get to learn new levels of persistence you never knew you had, or you get out of it quick because you'll just harm yourself.
And that was actually the best piece of advice I ever got from anybody. I took writing classes with Nancy Kress when I lived in Rochester, New York. She taught classes there locally. And she said something one time that always stuck with me. She said, I've known great writers who never persist and just never find any success, and mediocre writers who persist, and find great success.
Yes. Because if you persist long enough, your readership will find you. But for them to find you, you have to persist long enough. And it's really tough.
And sometimes
There's
you're gonna
all
get
manner
those-
of junk thrown in your way.
Yeah.
You find out, it's what I said about characters the other day, you don't find out what they're made of by showering them with puppies and kittens. You find out what your characters are made of by testing them in adverse circumstances and seeing if they can persist. And it's the same for the writers of the characters. You find out very quickly what you are made of when you're off to a big start and then your 3rd, 4th, and maybe your 5th books crash. I've seen that happen to better writers than me. Some of them got out of it. Some of them kept going and are now famous names. Some of them said, "No, I can't cope with this," and they stepped away, and that was the end of it.
It made me think of Victoria Schwab, or
Yeah.
Katie Schwab. Apparently had a very, very bad experience with her first, I'm not even sure if it was a trilogy or quartet at, I think it was Disney, where it never got finished. And that was like her first 3 or 4 books. She had 2 more after that. She had something like 5 books before Darker Shade of Magic, which was really the book that landed her. And she's been if you ever follow her on Twitter, she's very candid about her experiences and her work. And it shows you really, like, you can just be like, oh God, it's not going anywhere. And then all of a sudden it just takes off.
And you can't tell. There's no way to tell just what's going to come together to make that happen. Or you can just have a slow, gradual climb. No big signposts, no, showy stuff happening. You can just keep selling and selling and selling and selling. And people hire you because they see that you keep selling and selling.
Midlist authors, very,
Yes.
very successful midlist
Yes.
authors. You just continue, thinking Hillary Monahan.
Yeah. Yes.
Midlist author, but she comes out with a book every 8 or 9 months or so. They always sell consistently, and she's wonderful, and has a good career.
Persistence is worth more than. I've got to find the damn quote. Give me 2 seconds. Let me see if I can pull it up because I actually did a graphic of it one day. I was just so, repeatedly moved by this damn thing. And as I say, it's either Harry Truman or Woodrow Wilson or one of those guys. But let me just, if I did this and I just put in persistence, I'm betting it will come up in a hurry. So talk among yourselves.
Maybe a question?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Is there anything else?
I guess. Well, if you and I guess Diane can answer this found the quote. Is there like one project that you've seen either come through, come either yours or someone else's, where you just wanted to like take the team involved and give them little marionette streams and fix what's going wrong to have the project succeed?
I mean, yes. I mean, when I was a marketing designer, I'd see a lot of books come along, just like, really, guys, this is what's coming through. That's when it hit me as a marketing designer. It was coming to the end of its cycle, and you were already like, you saw that it's a train wreck in slow motion. You just knew that it wasn't going to end. I can't think of anything specific, and I probably shouldn't name names in that case. But yeah, there's a certain point sometimes where things just start going awry, and there's just no way of fixing them, and the book goes out, and again, it happens, and then everybody moves on.
Yeah, really. Okay, I found it. It's would you believe it's Calvin Coolidge? It's Calvin Coolidge, and if you put in my name and you put in the word persistence, you will find this. It is his quote: "Nothing in the world can take the place of persistence. Talent will not. Nothing is more common than unsuccessful men with talent. Genius will not. Unrewarded genius is almost a proverb. Education will not. The world is full of educated derelicts. Persistence and determination alone are omnipotent. The slogan, 'Press on,' has solved and always will solve the problems of the human race." Bang. That's really it. Just don't stop. Sooner or later, the universe will say, "Oh, for God's sake, get on with it here," and give you what you need. Just don't stop.
When I was querying my novel, this is what happened. I queried about for a year. And querying, for anyone who doesn't know, is when you send out basically a pitch letter to an agent, along with usually a small sample, and you're basically begging them to read your stuff and represent you so that they will then sell your book to an editor. I queried my book, and I got a lot of looky-loos and no offers from an agent representation. And it was middle of December, and I was like, it's the end of the year, it's time to put this book in a trunk, I'll move on to the next one. And I got a call from an agent, and she made an offer. And I thought, okay, this book is never going to sell, nobody's ever going to buy a young adult Western dystopian book. This is too weird, but it's okay, I've got an agent now, I'll work on the next project, we'll come up with something that will sell. We had interest from the editor within 2 weeks that it went on submission. So it was completely unexpected out of, that just happens.
Don't stop.
Don't stop.
That's all. So, it's your call. We're officially done at this point.
Yeah, we started late, so it's up to you.
Question?
Yeah.
Give quickly.
I'll take 3.
Yeah.
Yes. Anything to say about self-publishing?
Yes, there are definitely plenty of people who make really good money doing it. There is also just a lot of stuff self-published. Diane probably can speak more about this than I can, but I will say one thing: if you are going to self-publish, get an editor and get a copy editor.
Yeah.
That's all I have to say.
Yeah. It's doable. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work for those of us who grudge every second that is taken away from actually writing. It's a lot of work. You must be prepared to hire in what you are incompetent to produce yourself. You will need a copy editor. You will need an editor. You will need someone to design your covers unless you're competent to do that yourself. If you are, they must be extremely polished looking. Otherwise, everyone's going to look at them and go, "Oh God, it's another horrible thing from Amazon." You've got to stand out, and positively. If you could do all of that, take your chances with the rest of us. There's only 500,000 self-published writers on Amazon right now. But if you can find your audience, if you stay the course, Amazon's algorithms are geared so that if you put something new up into the space every 3 weeks and you get enough good stars on it, they will push you to the top with their suggestions lists by themselves.
Yeah, and some romance writers make very good money.
Excellent,
yeah.
But you must commit to like a 60,000 word book every 3 weeks. So what you do is you put 4 or 5 books on the spike before you even start. All right, and then you start pushing them out one every 3 weeks, and you make sure that you're writing behind them to top the spike up from the bottom. As you say, there are reports of really good results if you find your audience. You must be writing the whole. If you just Google on writing to market, put in quotes, writing to market, You will find endless advice about this, but most of it is concentrated on finding your niche, and the smaller your niche is, the better, because that means it's mostly going to be you exploiting it, and not 50,000 other writers doing the same thing. The fewer other writers you have to argue with that particular trope or that particular niche about, the better. You know, it's an old proposition that you find a very small corner of the market and become the master of it. And again, you must have a plan. You must know exactly what you're doing. You must do your market research. You must look and examine Amazon's results and see what is selling, and read those books and find out why. There are websites that will help you work on this kind of thing. I will not recommend any. Too many people need too many different things. I mean, in psychiatry, we learned very quickly that if, generally speaking, I speak broadly here, when people come to you for psychiatric assistance, they need one of three things for you in terms of branding. They need science, they need magic, or they need chicken soup. All right? And so if you give a chicken soup person, by which I mean the more supportive therapies, hugs, and support groups, if you give that to a person who needs Freudian therapy a la science, it won't work. You must find out what brand of magic that person needs and give it to them. Okay? You must give them their proper brand, not somebody else's, not what you prefer. You are not allowed to have your likings get involved in this job. So it's like that. You must find out exactly what that niche of customer wants, and you must give it to them without fail in every single book, in a format that doesn't change too much. For a lot of people, this idea, for those of us who cultivate the idea of wild creativity, for a lot of people this is the kiss of death. However, if you can do this, you could get rich. Will you be happy? I leave that with you. But it really, really helps if it's a niche you like writing in. It's my sense that nothing reveals itself faster than someone doing work that they hate for money. I think that sticks out all over it like spines within a matter of seconds. No one's going to want to read that. But if you can sell yourself into that niche as something you can work with happily, then what is my agent's favorite phrase? This could be very commercial. That's what Don would say. And there are people who do make respectable, sort of low six-figure salaries. Any six-figure looks respectable to me, frankly.
Yeah.
So, but it can be done. Amazon has made it possible. The system can be, I wouldn't say exploited, because that very idea would cause Jeff Bezos to appear in a puff of smoke in his stores. But it can be leveraged. I think that's the safest way to put it. There are ways to advantage your work by the way Amazon works. And there's a lot of people doing it. So that, if you want to follow up on it, just Google the phrase writing to market. And if that's something that attracts you, then you look into it. If it doesn't attract you, back away, find another way to follow your dream.
And one last note, because I always feel like the sort of logical next step for people to think, well, I'm not sure I can self-publish. There are a lot of predatory small presses out there. Mm-hmm. So if you are out there trying to sell your book and you find yourself approached by small presses, do your homework. I've known several people who have gotten screwed, frankly, by small presses. Even some that look very legitimate, because the margins in publishing are so small that a lot of small presses just don't make it. And there are some that will legitimately just will screw you. They will give you no money. They will, do your market research. Do your research on that market specifically, and on whatever press you're talking to.
But also, you never pay them.
Yes,
money
never.
flows
They
to
pay
the author.
you. They pay you. The money flows to the writer, not the other way around.
Same thing with agents.
Yeah.
Never give an agent money.
Yeah.
It happens every once in a while.
Yeah.
Somehow.
But
Okay.
anyway.
Do we have any more questions?
Yeah. There was a question earlier about projects where you wanted to go in and just be the marionette leader for difficult projects. Let's flip that around. What are some projects? Can you name some projects that you really enjoyed working on, or teams that you enjoyed working with?
I liked all my Trek editors. I've been very, very fortunate in my Trek people from top to bottom. The only exception to that was Next Generation. No, there was so much junk going on that first season. Ron Moore had a piece of butcher paper on which he collected the signatures of everyone who went on staff in that year. It now papers one wall of his downstairs bathroom. And no, really, it was horrific. People came in; it was like a revolving door, just coming in. People who came into the office realized they could not work with the chaos and toxicity that was commonplace in the Trek offices at that point. And they went in, they went out, and that was it. Gene, unfortunately, was not managing the situation as well as he might have. His lawyer was running a lot of things which he should not have been doing. Writers were being actively antagonized. People were not being paid for work they had done, or were not being credited correctly for work they had done. It was a dumpster fire, just barely. It was a dumpster fire with a starship stuck in it. It doesn't bear. It was a very big dumpster, with galactic-sized wheels. It was quite bad. And until the series got stable, sort of 3 years later, it was like that. And that's why they threw it open to fan submissions, because the word went out in Hollywood, if you value your sanity, for God's sake, stay away from them. And just professional screenwriters, stop submitting to Star Trek. Can you imagine something? And they got desperate, and they said, finally we can let's let some fans submit. At least we'll be able to shoot something. And Ron Moore came in with that first wave. So it's an ill wind, as we say, that blows nobody so good. But it was horrific. Everybody else at the Trek end has been brilliant for them. All my Trek book editors have been fabulous. But the TV end, not good at all. Yeah. So anyway, are we?
Yeah, I think we're out of time. So